There is an agenda to create an Orwellian, fascist, stroke communist, because they're the same really, global state, and to impose that in every country. Now, through the period of Tony Blair, who was just an unbelievable frontman for this agenda and the Rothschilds, that's why he's getting his payoffs now. He's getting payoffs now for services rendered in government. He's earned about £25 million apparently since he left office, what, 2 years ago? Because he's getting his payoffs for what he did in government. I mean, the man's so corrupt, it's unbelievable. But anyway, so through that period from 1997 to now, the Orwellian state in Britain and all the other aspects of the agenda that impinge upon Britain have just been rolled out in an incredible way. I mean, the amount of legislation that came in during the Blair era was unbelievable. I think the figure that one newspaper worked it out was a new law was passed throughout the Blair administration of 10 years, every 3 hours, right? And most of them didn't go through Parliament, because most laws don't actually get debated in Parliament. People don't realise that, but they don't. And so they really want to keep that going, because they want, for instance, to continue this process, massively part of the agenda, been exposing it for decades. They want to turn the European Union into a fully fledged United States of Europe, in which there won't even be any countries of Europe. They want to break the countries up into regions with no power and no influence. And to do that, they need to keep pushing power to the centre in Europe. The Conservative Party has a problem with that. Not that David Cameron is not a front man for it. He is a puppet. Yes, they're all puppets. But he has a problem in the Conservative Party, because there are still great chunks of that party's base support and electorate that don't want to keep giving Britain's sovereignty away to Europe. So he's not going to have such an easy ride to do that. Also, they don't want mass immigration either, right? And that's part of the agenda, and I'll tell you for why. The immigrants and the indigenous populations, not just in Britain but other countries, are being mercilessly used to the same extent. For this reason, I've just said, the agenda is to replace countries with impotent regions. They've already published the maps. And what they're doing, interestingly, a quick aside, but very relevant, is these maps coming out of the European Union, they don't have regions of Britain locked together, so there's some kind of unity. They have the south part of Britain connected to a region in France. They have another part of Britain connected to a region in Scandinavia, and because they want to break up any sense of unity, so the centre has total power. Now, one of the great resistances to having that happen is a sense of nationhood and a sense of culture. I don't care if it's the Indian culture or the Pakistani culture or what we used to call the British culture or the Swedish culture. Wherever you are in the world, there's a sense of culture which brings a kind of unity. And it's breaking up all unity, including the family, that they want. And so what they've done in Europe is they've taken the borders down. So we're having people pour into this country from these countries, and people go into these countries from these countries, and basically what they're creating on purpose is like a blob European cocktail culture which has no real identity. Tony Blair and Jack Straw, the government minister Jack Straw, who's really he's a puppet, but he's very much a front man. They decided on a policy of allowing as much immigration into Britain as possible to, quote, these were their words, change British society forever. That's this agenda I'm talking about. And people would reel back at that. What do they want to do that for? Because of what I'm describing. This is why they want the border with Mexico basically non-existent, so loads of people of Mexicans pour into America, and other people point to America, and they change the culture. What's America anymore? What's Britain anymore? It's just a blob. This is what they want, because what they're doing then is diluting the resistance to the end of the nation state, which is what the whole plan is. So, having said all that background, two parties are quite happy with both of those things and much else in the agenda, and they will not have the problem that Cameron would have with the Conservative base support of doing that, and that's the Liberal Democrats and the Labour Party. And if you want to keep the Labour, I'm not saying this is going to happen, because it depends how people vote. I'm saying this is the way it's going as we speak. One of the biggest Rothschild frontman in British politics is a guy called Peter Mandelson. He goes on holiday at Corfu at the Rothschild mansion, flaunts it in the papers. And his job, they brought him back from the European Union and made him a lord, therefore he could enter the British government without a single vote being cast in his favour. He came in to take control of the governing Labour Party, which after Blair, of course, for the last 2 years, 3 years, or whatever it is, has been led by the hapless, hopeless Gordon Brown. And he's trying to keep the Labour Party in government so they can continue this agenda that's been going on since 1997. But the British people are rejecting the Labour Party massively because of their appalling actions in government, including the Iraq war based on lies. And therefore, if he's going to keep them in power, he can only keep them in power with another party. And this is why suddenly Nick Clegg of the Liberal Democrats, who is Tony Blair personified, is just another Tony Blair. I mean, you know when Nick Clegg's lying because his lips are moving, just like Blair. And so suddenly, out of nowhere, this man's been held up, and with it, oh yeah, he's not a fresh face. He's just another career politician fronting up for the agenda. That's all he is. And he's been brought to the fore, and the Liberal Democrat support, at least in the opinion polls, has massively expanded, which has started to marginalise the Conservative Party. And the idea is, if they can pull it off, the chances are at the moment they will, is to have a coalition between two left-of-centre parties, alleged left-of-centre parties. Tony Blair, anything to do with Tony Blair is left-of-centre, are you kidding? Alleged coalition between the Labour Party and the Liberal Democrats. This will allow the Labour ministers who've come through since 1997, and people like David Miliband, etc., who quite possibly Mandelson wants to make the next Prime Minister, because one thing's for sure, whatever happens in this election, they're going to ditch Brown. They'll ditch Brown, no question. That's what it's all about, and Mandelson will do. And they'll bring this Nick Clegging and one or two of the other Liberal Democrats into government. They'll have this coalition. Now, Nick Clegg's, or at least what he's saying now, is that to do that, he will absolutely want a change in the electoral voting system in Britain from first past the post, which we've had up to now, to proportional representation. What proportional representation will do, and on one level it's a very good thing, it will mean that people's vote will be reflected in the government. However, what it will mean in practice, this is why they want it and Mandelson wants it, is it will mean that the Conservative Party, with its electorate that is against much of the agenda that's coming in, I mean, I don't agree with the Conservative Party. I mean, I've never voted Conservative in my life, never would. Don't like where they're coming from at all. But at least in the areas of Europe and all these other things, they've got more of a problem of getting those policies through. They will never be able to govern alone again, probably, because the proportional representation will mean that the Liberal Democrats and the Labour Party will have a constant coalition. In other words, what we will have is a one-party state. And the Liberal Democrats don't want to resist more power going to Europe. They want to give more power away. And the whole background of Nick Clegg is in the European Union. That's where he's come out of. Unless the Labour vote collapses so enormously that they don't win the majority of seats, which under a first-past-the-post system, they could get the least votes and get the most seats, unless that happens, I think that scenario will unfold. But there are other possible scenarios, but that's the one they want. I'm absolutely convinced of that.